Oh dear, another car crash at the BBC. Cricket legend Freddie Flintoff suffered life-changing injuries in a dangerous stunt on Top Gear in 2022. And I can reveal tonight it did not need to happen. As a handsomely funded broadcasting organisation with an annual income of over £5 billion, you would expect, wouldn't you, the BBC to be faultless in the way that it makes its programmes. In the absence of any commercial pressures and with no adverts, which gives them a huge advantage over the likes of us here at GBNews, the BBC should be the gold standard for television production and safety. However, former Top Gear star Chris Harris, who replaced Jeremy Clarkson after yet another BBC scandal, has sensationally told the Joe Rogan podcast that he raised serious safety concerns with BBC bosses months before Flintoff's near-fatal crash. He told them that somebody could be killed, but his concerns look to have been ignored. Take a listen.
There was a big inquiry, a lot of soul-searching. The BBC's good at that. But what was never spoken about was that 3 months before the accident, I'd gone to the BBC and said, unless you change something, someone's going to die on this show. So I went to them. I went to the BBC and I told them of my concerns from what I'd seen. As the most experienced driver on the show by a mile, I said, if we carry on, at the very least, we're going to have a serious injury. At the very worst, we're going to have a fatality.
Someone's going to die, serious injury. This was before the Flintoff crash that could have killed him. Harris also said that he asked to have a meeting with the head of health and safety at the BBC. Take a listen.
And what's really killed me is that no one's ever really acknowledged the fact that I called it beforehand. And it's very difficult to live with that initially for me. When I thought I'd done the right thing. I'm not very good at that. I normally just go with the flow. But I saw this coming. I thought I did the right thing. I went to the BBC and I found out really that no one had taken me very seriously.
Damning. Now, it's worth remembering that Freddie Flintoff may be an accomplished cricketer, but he's not a professional racing driver. This Ashes winner was placed in extraordinary danger in a three-wheeled Morgan car with no crash helmet. During the ill-fated stunt, this national hero's open-top vehicle flew into the air and landed upside down, leading to shocking facial and head injuries, which put Flintoff out of action for over a year, and which have left him with life-changing psychological and physical issues. Freddie has been so dignified about what happened. I've worked with Freddie Flintoff. He is an absolute gentleman. And following this devastating accident, quite typically and in character, he made no fuss. But don't be fooled. To give you a sense of how bad the accident was, it's been reported that the BBC paid Flintoff compensation of £9 million. And guess who's paying that bill? You and me, obviously. Now, Chris Harris isn't the only one who has flagged up the dangers that these BBC stars have faced. Here's what another former Top Gear presenter, Rory Reid, said to Times Radio earlier today.
Based on my experience, if you ask me whether putting someone without that level of driving experience in those situations and whether it would end well, no, I don't.
Wow. Now, this is the BBC we're talking about, not some daredevil on TikTok chasing clicks with dangerous stunts. This is our national state broadcaster with an almost unlimited budget. On this occasion, arguably imperiling the life of a national sporting hero. Freddie Flintoff could have died. Is it just me, or does the BBC behave like it's immune from the normal rules that the rest of us face in the workplace? Look at the chaos on Strictly Come Dancing, with celebrities complaining of post-traumatic stress disorder, physical injury and being reduced to tears following their experience on the corporation's biggest entertainment show. Today's papers are full of shocking allegations about Match of the Day star Jermaine Janus, who reportedly sent a flurry of inappropriate messages to a female colleague. And then, of course, there was the unmasking of one of the BBC's biggest stars, the face of its news operation Hugh Edwards, who was allegedly paying thousands of pounds to vulnerable youngsters, sending creepy messages to co-workers, and who was convicted of procuring the very worst category of child abuse images. Meanwhile, Gary Lineker, on £1.3 million a year to introduce football clips, calls October the 7th, in which over 1,000 innocent Jews were murdered at a music festival, the Hamas thing. Now, I want the BBC to survive and thrive. It's a great global brand and a huge asset. But whether it's the behaviour of its stars, the eye-watering waste, or the chaotic and dangerous management of its TV productions, the BBC is increasingly not fit for purpose. Our national state broadcaster is becoming a national embarrassment. Your thoughts, gbnews.com/your say. Is the BBC still fit for purpose? It's one scandal after another. Let's get to the views now of my top pundits, writer and broadcaster Nina Mishkov, journalist Linda Jubilee, and former newspaper editor Neil Wallace. Linda, your reaction to these new revelations about Top Gear?
I think they're really, really worrying. Chris Harris wasn't just warning 3 months ago, or several months earlier, when the incident actually took place, that there were going to be problems. He specifically warned about this particular car. The Morgan's an iconic British car, but it is hand-built. It is quite fragile. And this was a three-wheel car, unstable, and it needed an expert to drive it. And Chris Harris did warn people that that was the case. Yeah. But the BBC paid no attention. And I think this is kind of tied in with a Strictly Come Dancing scenario, where you've got people, these professional dancers are effectively elite athletes, and they are used to performing and behaving in a certain way, and they're then connected with people from the entertainment industry who are very, very capable, but with a completely different set of skills and a lot less resilient in some ways. With Hugh Edwards, I know for a fact that people knew they knew a little bit about what was going on a long time before it ever hit the public arena. With the latest one, Jermaine Jenis, I don't know what the BBC could have done about that. I mean, that's his WhatsApp messages, which I often say when I'm doing any kind of communications training, putting stuff onto WhatsApp is not safe. You think it is because it's end-to-end encrypted, but it's not. You can lose your phone can get stolen, your phone can be hacked. The girl or the man you send the WhatsApp messages to can disclose them, and it's a really big problem. He was incredibly stupid. I don't particularly think the BBC's at fault there, but I think in earlier instances, I think it should have been far more responsible.
Well, Neil, another developing story tonight, just breaking, and this is in the Sunday Telegraph. BBC breached guidelines 1,500 times over the Israel-Hamas war. The story goes as follows. The BBC breached its own editorial guidelines more than 1,500 times during the height of the Israel-Hamas war. The report revealed a deeply worrying pattern of bias against Israel. The former director of programmes at the BBC, Danny Cohen, has also written in the Telegraph, Neil, describing the Beeb as institutionally anti-Semitic. Our national state broadcaster's got problems, hasn't it?
It's got very considerable problems, and it's interesting this story breaks tonight in the Telegraph. I'm sure we'll be reviewing it later, but yeah. What you are seeing here is that these failures of management, immense failures of management, because that's what they really boil down to, failure of control, isn't just confined to showbiz, if you like. It isn't just about entertainment. It goes into, very worryingly, the news division as well. And I've read that story already, and I can tell you there's some seriously disturbing claims in the analysis that was done over a series of months about the BBC coverage. And, for instance, how often the BBC refers, or how little they referred to Hamas violence as terrorism, how much emphasis they were putting on Israeli military action and reporting the Hamas description and reporting of those cases. It's a really, really shocking piece of journalism. Important piece of journalism.
It is. You're absolutely right, Neil. Obviously, it's a big concern about this latest revelation in the Sunday Telegraph, Nina, that the BBC breached guidelines 1,500 times over the Israel-Hamas war. We know that they had to be browbeaten into calling Hamas an actual recognised terror organisation. But can we go back to the main story within the Take at 10, which is two former presenters of Top Gear warning the BBC that the show was dangerous before the Freddie Flintoff crash. A national sporting hero could have died because of BBC incompetence.
Well, that is absolutely shocking. The trouble is that, not so long ago since the BBC were an institution that we could be proud of. And along with that pride went a kind of arrogance for those people working within the BBC. Yeah. It was always, the BBC knew best, and they had standards of excellence. I remember in the days when they had a fantastic wardrobe department, a fantastic makeup department. You could go there and be trained in almost every aspect that would deal with television, media and entertainment, and you would be the best trained. Well, that was all kind of put to one side. Yeah. But that arrogance, in a way, still remains in some areas. And added to which, the BBC has been under fire for such a long time from the media, from various governments, whichever side feels that the BBC are not doing what they'd like them to do, and budget cutting, which has meant that they've had to scrape around. But that doesn't excuse them. I mean, the standards should remain. Health and safety should come first. The safety of the workers should be there.
Nina?
And something needs to happen.
On that, we can be agreed. Well, a BBC spokesperson has said the following. While BBC Studios had complied with the required BBC policies and industry best practice in making the show, there were important learnings which would need to be rigorously applied to future Top Gear UK productions.